crime to have unauthorized contact with criminal businesses that make money from kidnapping people and pay them? Yes, we on the government side strongly believe. And we believe that if we ban people from paying these criminal groups to release kidnapped victims, we can attack the root causes of these criminal groups and their very existence. That's why we support this motion. Now, I'm going to tell you how we can in fact focus more on actually cracking down on these groups. That will be one of our arguments. But before then, also how, and I have the wrong notes, but that's okay. And how this is a crime, how philosophically this is a crime, and secondly, how we are going to prevent the enabling of future crime, and then thirdly, how we can crack down. But first, let's look at our case. We believe all countries, and we'd rather focus on the democratic countries because they actually have like police institutes and so on. But all countries, we should take this plan. And in fact, right now, the people who are getting contacted by these criminal groups, once they're contacted by the criminal groups and once they decide to go along with that, the odds that they ever tell the police are basically zero. So there's basically no chance that they can ever solve the problem with the police, and that's a long-term harm, we think. But we should use the police instead of paying them off. What we should do is continue to use the police and improve the police payment and so on. Also, improve education and welfare. Why? Because we want to take away the underlying root cause of the problem of poverty, which is leading for people to make these criminal businesses in the first place. And we want to stop that. Furthermore, we have the overall policy of harm minimization. We want to reduce the likelihood that someone could be kidnapped for money. We think that's a terrible thing we want to stop. Now, looking at the issue of whether or not it's a crime to enable these criminal groups to get money, we think it is. And we understand there is a context where maybe your child was kidnapped and they're being threatened and so on. We understand that's a context. And in the case of, after this plan is taken, if the police find out that you paid money to get back your child, what should happen? We think, of course, you should be treated as a criminal. Now, if there's a possibility that your child is going to be killed, that could be what we call mitigating factor. What does that mean? It means when it's time to get the punishment, they consider, were you trying to save the life of your child or not? So they can reduce the punishment. But there still should be a punishment which counts as a punishment. Why? That's my first argument. Because after all, you know that you are having this unauthorized contact with this criminal business. And you know that you're enabling their criminal business. How are you enabling their criminal business? They have the business of getting money and using it for their criminal business, right? If you pay them, then of course their business has a bigger budget. They have bigger profits. Should you pay a kidnapping business so they can have more profits? That's probably not the good thing to do. So you know that you're doing this. If you are this kind of person who pays the criminal group, you know that instead of calling the police, you're choosing to act outside the law and on your own have this unauthorized contact with this gang and have this business transaction with them. And we think that is a crime, and it should be treated as a crime by the criminal justice system. And secondly, we find in the future there will be far more crime. There is far more crime because of the status quo, but we'll be able to cut that because we're going to cut incentives first of all. So right now, if you look at like say Brazil, where there's all these poor people who unfortunately are poor and they're kidnapping the children of rich people and so on, they get money from that. So they just have a financial incentive right there. But if we cut that financial incentive by telling the families you're not allowed to pay them, you get punishment if you pay them, then that incentive is gone. Then, once that incentive is gone, you're going to have less kidnapping, of course, because they don't have any money from the kidnapping. So people aren't going to kidnap, and in the long term, actually that helps everyone, because the whole total number of kidnapping decreases, and then the whole society can benefit. They don't have to be afraid to live in that society. So it's obviously going to be less crime in the future. But secondly, we think that the funding that is given to these groups by the families also enables future crime. So that future crime is also enabled by that money. Now, how do they use this money? Well, of course, they use the money to get a new car. If they use the car to kidnap someone and somebody sees the car, they have to get the new car with different license plate. They have to get different ammo, like bullets for the gun, and so on. The worst thing, though, is they take this money and they hire new people to expand their kidnapping business. And we're really afraid of that. First of all, of course, it's a harm because they're hurting more people. But they're actually taking more people and they're incentivized to expand their business. So what happens is, more poor people are then brought into the criminal side. And we think that's quite terrible. And we don't want to see these poor criminals having the incentive to tell their friends to join their gang, because then there's more criminals than before. And that, we think, is quite horrible. Thirdly, we find that there's simply no chance for justice while you have this system where the Brazilian families or the American families or whoever, they never tell the police because they have their secret deal with the criminal groups, and they're going to pay off these criminal groups, and they're going to have their children come back. And because, why would they tell the police? There's no incentive. But after our plan, of course, they're much more incentivized to tell the police because they cannot pay, right? And the police might find out anyway through their wiretapping and so on. And we think it's much easier to crack down. Once the police are working with them, the police can try to track down these criminals. And they could possibly capture one of them. And if they capture one of them, they can capture all of them, spread through the whole network. So what we see now is there's at least a chance for justice. Why? Because at least there's a chance that the family of the victim could tell the police, and then you can start the process of the police crackdown. But you're not going to do that if the family is secretly making financial deals with these criminal groups at all. So what we've told you so far is that the root cause of these problems is poverty, and that poverty has to be addressed. It takes time to develop poor neighborhoods and so on. It takes time, but we want to slowly do that. And we think at least we can minimize the harm by having this policy in place, because at least less people will be kidnapped. Why? Because, of course, we're not incentivizing the kidnappers with money, and we're not incentivizing them to tell their friends to join their gangs, and because we're not paying them all this money they use to buy more guns and continue the criminal operations. Furthermore, it's just the right thing to do. If you get a bad phone call that your child has been kidnapped, instead of calling the police, you say, okay, I'm going to pay you money. Honestly, you are at least a criminal, right? Maybe you get mitigating factor and it's not a big punishment, but you are breaking the law because you're choosing to do the illegal thing instead of choosing to do what's best for society. So for those reasons, we strongly stand in affirmative.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Now I call on the Leader of Opposition to deliver a speech within 8 minutes. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Stance on the legal debate is really simple and clear. We accept there is a problem of abductions, but we think the way they solve the problem is unjust in considering about the criminal justice system. More than that, we think their problem will get worse by taking this policy, because the Johnson didn't tell us a clear mechanism why they can solve the problem. That's the reason we then do it first. I'm going to tell you why principally this policy is unjust, considering about the criminal justice system. We think the criminal justice system should consider the intent of the individual, not the consequences of that crime. Second, I'm going to tell you why this policy has a short-term implications of this policy, why it's going to radically solving criminal activity, and this is what will get worse. My partner is going to tell you the long-term implication, why this will reduce the cooperation between the police and the civil servant. So, but we're going to engage with what the Johnsons have said. Firstly, about the model we have in Portugal now. So they were like, by taking this policy, and at the same time we improve the education and welfare. We are happy to do that if we want to improve the education and welfare. It's something we are doing in the current framework for more than like 100 years, Mr. Speaker. I think we are doing that, Mr. Speaker. We think if this is not enough, we have to do that, I think, without taking this policy. And we are doing that. We think it's extremely ignorant for them to say they can solve every single body by mystical about improving education and welfare. The second thing you will be punished. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that's not true, Mr. Speaker, because that is not your own free will to commit crime in this instance, Mr. Speaker. Even if the child have a robbery, we don't punish these children, Mr. Speaker. We just without ignoring the consequences. But this is not justified in these instances. Second thing they are brought up is that they're going to solve this problem in short term. They said that they're going to cut the root cause of the financial incentive. Mr. Speaker, they don't cut the root cause of the financial incentive, Mr. Speaker. Because even after doing this policy, there will be a poor person who want more money, right? We don't see how these people, how is the root cause to commit a crime is going to get down with the financial incentive. Second thing they have brought up, third thing they have brought up was like this, the long-term implication, right? Still some said, well, there's no chance in the status quo for the people to report the police officer. I think that's false, Mr. Speaker. Because in the status quo, yes, you have really asked people who don't tell the police and have a secret contact with young person. We think after giving back of their own children and after securing the children's life at their home, these parents can contact with the police and tell the police about the information, Mr. Speaker. We think this solution can exist by following each other after data. And then after taking this policy, they can solve long-term. Mr. Speaker, we don't think that's true, Mr. Speaker, because after taking this policy, these people don't tell the police, Mr. Speaker. Because if they tell the police about secret contact with their gang, they will going to criminalize, right? We don't think there's no incentive whatsoever for the parents to have contact with police, Mr. Speaker. Because the characterization of the parents is the parents who fear the police is not working, who think police is not trustworthy, right? We think cannot get these characterizations. Then these parents won't tell the police, I'm even after taking this policy, and they won't do that even after taking this policy. That's the reason why their policy is wrong. So, firstly, about principally why this policy is unjust. We think there's two reasons why we think this policy is invalid and unjust. First, we're going to point out this policy is disproportionate punishment towards the family in this instance. Mr. Speaker, because we think this punishment is ultimately, it's a severe thing they're going to do. They will deprive every single freedom you have. For example, you deprive the freedom of movement of you. For example, you can't see your family, you can't go to school, you can't go to job, every single movement will be deprived. That's really, this punishment should be given proportionately to what they have done. We think the reason why the government can take away people's freedom in these instances, because if the government feels that there is necessity for us to rehabilitate these criminals, rehabilitate this vicious mind of the individual, that these people won't have this vicious mind in our society and make society function. That's the only reason why the government can deprive people's choices. That's why, for example, in many liberal cities, there's a trend to abolish this penalty because we feel there's a clear need for us to rehabilitate this individual. But we think on this side of the house, this family is not fit the criteria of the capacity. Why? Because this family don't have malicious intent. For example, just the same way people kill other persons to speak of. Because the reason why this family pay money, because they want to save their own family members to speak of. Because we point out, children is in a dangerous situation. For example, there's a letter that the criminal organization by saying, if you don't pay money, I will cut off your children's fingers and send it one by one to your home. This will create massive fear inside the family's family. The family don't have clear malicious intent to hurt others, but they purely intent to save your own family member. Within this kind of intent, itself don't have a vicious intent. There's no necessity for the government to take away these people's freedom in these instances. That's why this policy is extremely unjust. Secondly, we want to point out this policy is unjust. It's because this choice is not a free will, Mr. Speaker. Because this is the reason why they can't pay money. They are affected by the criminal organization. For example, if Takeru, put guns on my head and said, kill your smell. I'm sorry, I want to kill your smell. But it's not a crime, right? Because it's not my free will to commit crime, Mr. Speaker. That's just a simple reason, simple principle we share in democracy. I think in these instances, we think current families is threatened to do that. Why? Because first we pointed out children is the vital part of your life. And we think children's life is threatened. We think this is a huge threat. For example, there are some mothers who create baby by threatening their own life. I think this clearly shows family has clear incentives to save the children's family most. They are prioritize this children's life in this instance. They want to send their children to better education, to better medication, by sacrificing their own money, by sacrificing their own labor. This clearly proves that family strength is a vital part of your life. This means it's a clear huge threat. But secondly, there's a clear emerging question. If you don't act right now, if you tell the police officer, they are saying they're going to cut off your children's finger and send it one by one. We think this is clearly proves this emerging question. There's no chance for man to think. They will contact the police officers to pick up. Because they say if you crime of abductions, they don't re-radicalize. They don't kill these children. They don't kill these people who they go out of them. Why? Because if they kill, so then if they kill this person, they will lose the trust or the credibility in this instance, Mr. Speaker. Because in order for the criminal to continue their own scheme, continue their own abduction, they have to show if you pay money, I will send you children back safely, right? That's the only way for them they have to create a norm that if you pay money, the children will get sent back safely. I think that's why in the status quo, the student is safe. But after this policy, what's going to be happened? So there are many ways for criminals to commit crime, right? For example, criminals capturing this individual and take away their own money and just kill them, right? Because this kind of incentive will not be deterred by taking this policy. Will be deterred by taking this policy, right? Because if after taking this policy, even if you kill, you don't lose money, right? But in our policy, if you kill your children, you lose this too for you to get huge amount of money instead of abduction, right? That means after this what's criminal will radicalize, these people criminal will continue to observe and capture and kill them and take away their own money. You should lose a lot. This is the only difference between their case and our case. For that reason, to be accurate first.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition. Now I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to deliver the second constructive speech within 8 minutes. Stephen.
So I'm going to talk about three issues in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the principle as to whether or not we should criminalize those actions. And secondly, I'm going to touch upon the practical consequences which was presented by both of the House. So first of all, let me talk about the principle, Mr. Speaker. Because what we heard from the first argument and also the bulk of the rebuttal from the legal position is that how it is immoral to criminalize those people because they're purely motivated by a will to save their own children, and also they are not making this choice out of their free will, Mr. Speaker. So first of all, they talk about how, Mr. Speaker, the intent is not, in this case, is not so malicious as, for example, murderers and rapists, and therefore, on that basis, we should criminalize those people. That is not true, Mr. Speaker. Although we accept those people's, how malicious they are in terms of their intent, is not tantamount to, for example, rapists and murderers. But, Mr. Speaker, they're still, Mr. Speaker, knowing the consequences, knowing the likely consequences that actually, if they give money, A, they're going to incentivize more criminal organizations to commit crimes, because obviously, criminal organizations will gain the confidence that actually they can get more money, Mr. Speaker, by abducting people. But secondly, actually those criminal organizations can utilize that money, right? To, for example, hire more people and also commit more robberies and also commit more abductions. And furthermore, they can commit other crimes, for example, drug trafficking, which are also committed by the very same criminal organizations, right? And so because they're informed about the reasonable expectation that the actually giving money to criminal organizations will lead to the eventuality that more crimes are going to happen, more social order will be destroyed, and because of their action, Mr. Speaker, we think, Mr. Speaker, because of this, Mr. Speaker, they should be criminalized. No, we accept, Mr. Speaker, they are not malicious as murderers or rapists. Well, we accept, Mr. Speaker, but that can be taken into consideration as a mitigating factor, as Jonathan told you, Mr. Speaker. Let me give you two examples as to how we can criminalize these people with their intent, Mr. Speaker. For example, we have the poor people who commit theft or shoplifting because they're poor, or as the legal position said, they might care about their children, and that is why they might commit shoplifting to get money or get things to feed their children, right? In those circumstances, although they have the incentive to save their own, for example, relative or family, then we are going to criminalize those people, right? Because of the consequences that they are, first of all, they are harming society, and B, because they have reasonable expectations that their action is going to harm society, right? And Mr. Speaker, so we don't need, Mr. Speaker, extremely malicious intent to criminalize these people because we can consider it as in our framework, right? Mr. Speaker, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, they are extended malicious consciousness is not really an issue in today's game, Mr. Speaker. We don't have to we don't have to take it into consideration in terms of whether we criminalize these people or not, Mr. Speaker. Now, second of all, in the second subpoint of the first argument, it talks about how these people are not making this choice out of their free will. Drawing the example of self-defense, there is an analysis, right? In the case of self-defense, you know that in the next moment of time, you're going to be killed, Mr. Speaker. You have no other option but to kill the other people. That is why, Mr. Speaker, self-defense is allowed. But this is not the case, right? Although we accept it might be difficult for the people, for the victims to call and report to the police, because as the earlier person said, they are threatened by the criminal organization so that they don't report to the police. But it is still possible, right? For example, secret to report to the police, so that criminal organization will not know about the fact that they report to the police, right? We accept it is difficult, but because it is difficult and because it is not easy for them to make this choice, we can take it into consideration as a mitigating factor, right? So, Mr. Speaker, as long as they still have a choice or option to go to the police, Mr. Speaker, on that basis, Mr. Speaker, we should not blanketly, Mr. Speaker, alleviate the criminality of these people, right, Mr. Speaker? They have to show why we should blanketly and altogether alleviate the criminality of those people. We don't think that's what's proven by the legal position, Mr. Speaker. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, as long as they inform about the likely consequences, we can punish those people because we have other options, although it may be difficult, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to further enhance that first one, our argument of principle, Mr. Speaker, because, Mr. Speaker, actually, Mr. Speaker, because as I already established to you, how individuals know about the consequences of further strengthening this criminal organization by their own actions, right, Mr. Speaker? Why is it important? Because obviously, Mr. Speaker, all society agree there's overwhelming consensus that organized crime is extremely serious, right, Mr. Speaker? This is why, Mr. Speaker, the whole society, Mr. Speaker, fights against the organized crimes which are committed by the criminal organization which commit abductions, right? That is, Mr. Speaker, we punish heavily things like, for example, the organized crimes, for example, drug trafficking, Mr. Speaker, and even more heavily the crimes which are committed by the individual, right? And when there is so overwhelming consensus, which are made by the citizens of the democratic, in a democratic procedure, Mr. Speaker, the citizens have the duty to obey, Mr. Speaker, to the norm and the consensus which are established by the democratic process, by the citizens, right? In this circumstance, when those people actively strengthen the criminal organizations and strengthen the ability of those organizations to commit further organized crimes, we think that is heinous, right, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker. So we think that this going against the social norm and consensus which are established by the democratic citizens should be considered as extremely as a heinous crime, and that's why, Mr. Speaker, we can criminalize those people on that basis, Mr. Speaker. Now let me give you some examples to show that even if they are actually not direct, we can punish these people. For example, we criminalize people based upon the complicity, right? Although the action might be indirect, although the action might not necessarily lead to the consequences, we punish those people, right? For example, we commit crimes against the people who suggest others to commit crimes, even though they do not know 100% whether the person they suggested to will commit crimes or not. We criminalize those people for the suggestion, or we criminalize people who aid in terms of other people, right? For example, by giving guns or providing methods of crimes, right? Like we've seen those complicities, by example of complicity, we can punish the people, Mr. Speaker, who actively help others to commit further crimes, and that is, Mr. Speaker, on that basis, we are principally superior. Now, moving on to our second issue, it's about practicality. Now, the leader person told us, Mr. Speaker, and even in the plan, because the character of people, otherwise we do not trust the police, the situation is going to change. That is not the truth, Mr. Speaker. We never give the characterization that we are talking about the people who do not trust the police, right? The very reason why the Shida Store did not report to the police in many circumstances and only give ransom to the criminal organization is because, Mr. Speaker, they feel it is more safer. They feel that there's a higher possibility of saving the victims if they go to if they give ransom to the criminal organizations instead of reporting to the police, right? We accept that value, Mr. Speaker, and that's why, Mr. Speaker, they are not trusting the police, but rather they feel it's safer to give ransom to the criminal organization. But their incentive process is going to change in the plan. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because they are no longer allowed to ask the criminal organization, right? If they do contact the criminal organization, they will be punished under opposite, right? Because it is crime. And that's why the only method for those people in the plan to save their sons and daughters is to call to the police, right? And that's why, Mr. Speaker, in the plan clearly, they will be incentivized to report to the police, and that's why the police will have more information, Mr. Speaker, to entrap those criminal organizations and catch them, right? And that's, Mr. Speaker, in the plan, we are going
Anderson. Now I call on the Deputy Leader of Opposition to deliver a speech within 8 minutes. Theatre.
Mr. Speaker, three issues in this debate. Firstly, whether this is a crime or not. Secondly, the harm to the victim. And thirdly, I'm going to extend this debate by explaining to you how this is going to worsen the situation and how this is going to radicalize these kind of kidnappers. So firstly, is this a crime or not? What we clearly told you from the negative is that the only time in which we can criminalize someone and punish them by sentencing to prison and deprive them of their fundamental liberty is then when they have a malicious intention to harm the society. That intention does not exist in the case of these parents, Mr. Speaker, because the intention of these parents is the protection of their children. Their response to this was that, well, they still know the consequence that they're empowering this kind of criminal action. Well, no, Mr. Speaker, when you hear your daughter screaming across the telephone, the only thing that you are thinking is about the well-being of your daughter. You're not making a social calculus and whether, if you provide a certain amount of money, how much that's going to empower this kind of criminal organization. So we don't think the malicious intention necessarily exists. We don't think that these parents have the capacity to consider about the social consequence of the social calculus, Mr. Speaker. But the second response is, Mr. Speaker, that people should be held liable if they do not have any choice, or people shouldn't be held liable if they don't have a choice to commit that crime or not. Even if a person commits a crime, if that crime is committed under the influence of coercion, we do not prosecute those people of their crime. The example is self-defense, Mr. Speaker. Even if a parent might kill an intruder in order to protect their children, that is perfectly justified, Mr. Speaker. That logic applies in this debate as well, because these parents are simply self-defending their children, Mr. Speaker. As a consequence of that, we think that since there's no option and choice for these individuals, we still think that they shouldn't be criminally liable. Their response to this was, well, we still punish, if that logic is true, that means that we'll punish poor people we won't punish poor people if they commit burglary. Obviously that's not analogous in today's debate, because the degree of threat is completely different, especially in the context of liberal democracy in which they set up. I don't think there's any poor people starving to death in this situation. They are basic social welfare, Mr. Speaker. So we don't think that there's that analogy that's really applicable in this debate. The only logic in which that side of us really gave us was that this is criminally liable because you necessarily are empowering criminal activity. We criminalize people who incite to commit crime. We criminalize people who provide weapons and arms and support crimes from happening. Yeah, that's true, and we don't think that's analogous because obviously people have an option to support a crime or to incite a crime. That option doesn't exist with these parents. But furthermore, if you support a crime, if you provide a weapon or if you incite a crime, there's necessarily a malicious intention behind that action. We have to explain to you that malicious intention does not exist, Mr. Speaker. But furthermore, Mr. Speaker, we don't think that just because you are making a harm to the society, we should legally criminalize these kind of parents. Because the root cause of the problem, yes, maybe poverty, that's not caused by these parents. That's the responsibility of the state. The state failed to provide certain economic policies or educational policies, and that created the cause. Why should the parents who have no responsibility in creating that situation take the responsibility? We don't think the negative has answered to that question. So moving to the second issue, the harm to the victim. Now, the only logic which they gave that kind of option was that this is necessarily going to decrease the financial incentive of these kidnappers to commit crime because less parents are necessarily going to report. No, it's not. Firstly, as long as there is even a slight number of family who are willing to pay ransom to these kind of kidnappers, the financial incentive will always exist. Now, it might be true that it might not be as lucrative compared to the status quo, but they will simply raise the ransom per cases. Maybe in the status quo, they are demanding $1 million ransom per cases. After plan adoption, yes, it might be true. They might be 10 times difficult to kidnap a person and get any ransom, but they will simply demand 10 times more the money. They'll demand $10 million instead of $1 million. So you don't really necessarily change financial incentive that's significant. But the second response to the after-plan adoption is that it won't decrease, but because it doesn't really solve the root cause of the problem, which is the risk of getting caught. They don't actually give any mechanism why these kind of kidnappers and criminals will feel like more possibility or more risk in getting captured, Mr. Speaker. As long as you don't increase as long as you don't increase the risk of these kidnappers being captured, you don't really solve the root cause of the problem. We believe that after-plan adoption, this rather decreases the risk of getting caught, because that decreases the incentive of these parents in reporting the crime, Mr. Speaker, as my partner has told you. But the third response to the after-plan adoption is that, even if, Mr. Speaker, the number of kidnapping cases might decrease, according to their logic, that doesn't necessarily mean that crime in general will decrease. If I was a kidnapper and kidnapping becomes less lucrative, what I would start a legitimate business or start going to university and getting an education. I will simply start committing other crimes, such as drug trafficking, or extortion. So in general, you don't really solve the general problem, which is the increase in crime. So we believe, as a consequence of that, you are unnecessarily harming the victim and not solving any problem. So let's move on to my substandard, which is how this is going to lead to the radicalization of these kind of characters, how this is going to worsen the situation. Now they tell us that after-plan adoption, since we're going to criminalize these kind of people, the parents will necessarily report their crime, and things such as norms start to change, and as a consequence of that, these kind of cases necessarily decreases. Now even in the status quo, Mr. Speaker, contacting these kind of kidnappers, contacting these kind of crimes is extremely risky for these parents. But the reason why they do that is because their personal affection to their children is that strong. These kind of parents are willing to die in order to get their children back. So we don't think that you necessarily, just because you criminalize these parents not to report crime, we don't think that there's a huge enough incentive to disincentivize these parents to report the police. Further, we believe that this is going to lead to the radicalization. Because if their logic is true, and if families don't pay ransom, these kind of kidnappers will have an increased incentive to simply kill off the victim. Two reasons why. Firstly, because if they let the victims go and let the victim return to their home, those kind of victims will necessarily provide certain information to the police. They don't want to do that. They'll simply kill that victim. But furthermore, even if they don't kill that victim, oftentimes what happens is that they will simply drug that victim and sell them off to human traffickers. And we believe that it's still a harm. But furthermore, Mr. Speaker, every time media report these kind of criminal cases, that necessarily makes people worried. People start to think that, even if I don't pay their ransom because I follow the law of the government, my children, the victims won't be safe. As a consequence of that, people's trust into this particular law will decrease, and people will still report to pay ransom to these criminals anyways. So as a consequence of that, more people will simply decide to break this particular law and pay that ransom anyway. So why is this a harm compared to the situation which we have right now? Why is this worsening the situation? Because in this situation, even if the family decides to pay that ransom to the kidnapper will have a decreased incentive in returning the victim to the family. Why is that? Because now the kidnapper knows that the family, even if they return the victims to their family, cannot report to the crime. Because if they report to the crime, they necessarily have to be criminalized. So as a consequence of that, you're destroying the incentive for these parents to report the crime to the police after they receive the victims back, Mr. Speaker. And as a consequence of that, these kidnappers will simply sell off that victim to human trafficker to make an extra few dollars. Mr. Speaker, as a consequence of that, this is not going to change the situation in any positive way. This is going to worsen the situation, and we beg you to oppose.
Thank you to the leader of opposition. Now I call on the government clerk to deliver a whip speech within 8 minutes. See you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Two failures on today's presentation. First of all, they impose disproportionate burden on themselves. They say these people do not have any intention at all. Therefore, we can eliminate all criminality of these individuals. That's impossible for opposition side to prove that. At least we can prosecute these people, ladies and gentlemen. If you commit crimes because of desperation of money, we don't give you harsher sentence, but at least we can prosecute you, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we want to actually on our side. We don't think these people have no intention, no criminality whatsoever. That's ridiculous claim on that side of the house. But secondly, they say free will. So notice, Mr. Speaker, the incentive of these people will change after taking proposal. After taking proposal, these individuals know that they have to report incident to the police, otherwise they will be criminalized. But they actively choose to cooperate with the organization. That's the incentive or intention of the individual after taking proposal. They need to respond to the paradigm shift that we have identified here. I'm going to get into like two issues today. First of all, what is the nature of the crime? What kind of acts are called crime? The secondly, which side can better crack down or deter future possible crimes? About the first issue, what is the nature of crime? Firstly, because this is not a free will, this promotes strength burden. That's the first principle coming from that side of the house. Firstly, we say this can be mitigating factors in court to lighter sentence, but it doesn't automatically mean we should prosecute this individual at all, ladies and gentlemen. As my partner told you, people commit crimes because of desperation of money, but it doesn't automatically mean that crimes can be less bad or crimes can be like eliminated or erased at all in court in criminal justice system, ladies and gentlemen. We should consider this rebuttal should be taken into account seriously this way. But analogy of that side of the house is very strange because children commit crimes, they're not prosecuted. Therefore, we can apply same principle to individuals. No, because children don't have ability to consent rationally. That's the grounds of those analogy. That has nothing to do with the fact. But secondly, there's like a risk analogy of self-defense. It's emergency situation, thereby individuals have legitimacy to fight against these kind of crimes. Two responses. First of all, self-defense is only when you have no other option you are allowed to fight against those like a criminal, actual criminal. You have many options. You have good option after taking proposal, that is to report incident to the police and cooperate with the police. That's the option that we can give after taking proposal. But secondly, in the case of self-defense, the individual can fight back against criminal, but other people are not doing that, ladies and gentlemen. In the case of kidnapping, ladies and gentlemen, the parents are becoming hero by proxy justice person and trying to save the children as a hero. That's not what criminal justice is, ladies and gentlemen. Individuals are victims in this way, ladies and gentlemen, not the other people helping this country by proxy of the state. That's not the role of the individual, that's the role of the criminal justice system. But Uchiyama-san said, when people commit crimes, when the victims' families' feelings are so emotional, so visceral, when your daughters are intimidated by the muscle men like Uchiyama-san, these parents are not capable of making rational decisions. But that's applicable to any crime. For example, if my girlfriend has love affairs with some other boy, I will become disproportionately emotional. But it doesn't automatically mean like I can kill that possibly like a visualized boyfriend, ladies and gentlemen. That's not the case, ladies and gentlemen. Still, I will be prosecuted at least. This is what we want to achieve on our side. We shouldn't. But it's impossible. But it's critical to say we can eliminate any criminality on this individual, even if the intention is not that malicious as rapist. But finally, Mr. Speaker, even if these people don't have intention at all, this is very like fancy word analogy, but even if these people don't have any intention at all, still it is wrong for those victims to unauthorizedly contact with criminal organizations outside the criminal justice system, because that's essentially the role of the state or role of the justice system to interact with the criminal organization. Even if you don't have any malicious intention, the act itself is wrong, or legally wrong, because you are not authorized or legally empowered to interact with the criminal organization, or rather you shouldn't support those organizations in a financial way, in a way of empowering your resources. Moving on to the second item, this is also important. Which side can crack down or deter future possible crimes? Firstly, the radicalization, very a curious argument. Firstly, the logic is like this. In the status quo, criminal organizations have credibility. If victims pay money for this organization, these people will return the victims back to them. They have credibility. On the first response, it's very strange because individuals in society are not proficient of criminal organization. You don't know which criminal organization have credibility in the first place. You're not like a trying to kindly cooperate and negotiate with victims so that they can get money, they actually admit that the problem in the status quo is so structural or perpetuated that they can't crack down these criminals in the status quo. Thereby, our solution is the only way to crack down this structural cause of the problem if credibility of the organization is the cause of the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Thirdly, Uchiyama-san gave a new argument, a new analysis of how they will radicalize criminal acts. Firstly, the Uchiyama-san's final argument is predicated on based on the assumption that after taking proposal, criminal organization will still orchestrate after. But that's not the case. We have exemplified how after taking proposal, the abduct itself will not occur in the first place because there is no benefit for these people to conduct hostage checking in the first place. There is a risk will remain the same. No, risk will comparatively larger because the benefit they get will lose, ladies and gentlemen. Right? The risk coincides with the benefit. We have to consider we have to comparatively consider the possibility of risk, the possibility of benefit. If we consider these two factors, there is no benefit for criminal organizations to continue to risk themselves of being arrested and try to negotiate with victims they are not possibly paying the money at all. Instead, they will report incidents to the police, ladies and gentlemen. Moreover, what we want to emphasize is that there are other crimes will anyway occur. That's the responsible response coming from the opposition, like human trafficking or drug trafficking, right? But that means that's the unique harm of our proposal, right? Those criminals are occurring in the status quo. They have to show how they can reduce those criminals in the status quo if they claim that's the harm, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of the day, or at the end of that speech, firstly, they didn't show any solution to the clear and structural problem within the status quo. There's a credibility system between organization and the victims. If that's the case, they have to solve that. And they provide no solution in the current paradigm. But secondly, it's impossible for them to prove these people don't have no intention at all. If they have any intention, a big intention, at least we can prosecute this individual. The fourth choice or desperation doesn't make crimes less bad. We still punish these people, ladies and gentlemen. Just because you are emotional, it does not automatically mean you can erase any criminality on your acts. Moreover, you are subsidizing criminal organization activity. That's a complicity or conspiracy. This is no engagement about the notion of conspiracy and drug subsidization to this organization, which financially encourages this organization. We're very proud to propose the motion here.
Thank Government Whip. Charles Bolton on the opposition whip to deliver the whip speech within 8 minutes. See you.
We believe that the opposition is the one that are imposing, extremely high burden placed on them. Because they fail to prove that how this policy is going to completely eradicate all the kidnapping cases. We believe this is not going to happen. What this policy does is, create more children being victimized and also leads to less effective investigation, which leads to more criminal organization engaging in not only this act of kidnapping, but also other more serious crimes. And there's a reason why we are standing on the side of position. So 3 issues in today's debate. First of all, the principle of criminal punishment and whether or not these people deserve punishment in the first place. And secondly, how do we save victims? Which side can reduce increase the number of victims. Thirdly, how do we deal with this criminal organization and which side can provide better investigation scheme. So let's talk about the principle of criminal justice system. What we told you from the first speaker, from the entire government bench, is that what Jonathan has told you is that these people deserve punishment because they are choosing to enable the criminal business as opposed to doing what's best for the society. And what we told you from the side of opposition is that criminality should not be based on consequence itself. And what we say is that what's the point of people who do not have an inherent tendency to do something really bad and pose a threat to society? What's the point of imprisoning these people, rehabilitating these people who will no longer pose a threat to society once their children will be saved? We clearly explain the principle of rehabilitation and how punishment should primarily consider rehabilitation, and there is no response coming from the side government. And their response was that they have the intent to facilitate criminal business because they know what's going to be the consequence. And what we told you is that this is actually false. And if you allow babies crying on the telephone, you don't think these people can rationally predict what's going to happen when they pay the money to criminal organizations. Their only intention is to protect their loved one. We don't think there is a malicious intent. And also what we told you is that in that kind of circumstance, in that kind of tragic circumstances, the level of rationality is inevitably reduced to the point where we cannot expect truly rational decision, and it's simply unfair to blame this individual. And also, what we heard from the government bench is that these people could have chosen other ways, such as calling the police. What we say is that it is extremely unfair to expect the act which increases the risk of their children being killed in the first place, right? And so what we say that it is extremely unfair to impose more burden to people who are already in a tragic situation and whose already intent is to save their children. And this is why, in the same way, Western nations do not punish prostitutes that are abducted by criminal organizations and forced into doing so, because we recognize that expecting these people to call the police will increase the risk of themselves being killed by this criminal organization if they themselves found out. And also what we say is that we can just consider the mitigating factor. It is extremely unclear as to how they're going to consider the mitigating factor. Because what this policy does is that they're going to punish individuals who pay ransom. And every family who are captured whose baby are captured by organization will pay factor. So it is unclear how they're going to consider as a mitigating factor. But more than that, it shows that how they are already considering that these people do not have a malicious intent. They don't have the intent to pose a threat to society in the first place. And their analogy was that people commit shoplifting out of poverty. The distinction between these people and the families we are talking about is that while these people who commit shoplifting out of poverty, we cannot expect these people not to commit shoplifting in the first place, because in the first one we have a bunch of social, we have education system, we have hard working in Tokyo, right? But on the other hand, when we look at families whose babies are abducted, as we said, those babies' lives are already in the hand of criminal organization. This criminal organization can kill these babies if they want, anytime. So we believe that it is extremely unfair to expect family's only priority is save their own children. And if this family faces a choice between saving the children by paying the ransom and finding themselves in prison for 2 to 3 years, we think that this family will obviously choose to pay a ransom and choose the best way that can save their children. But moreover, what they miss is that those families already risking their lives because they are the ones that carry their money to a criminal organization. So these people already have the tendency to risk their own life in order to save children. So their policy doesn't really change the incentive of their families. But secondly, what we say is that this policy also does not solve the crime in general because those criminal organizations will continue to have financial incentive. This criminal organization will continue to need more money in order to expand their business. So what this policy does is that this policy only serves to shift these crimes from kidnapping to other crimes such as prostitution, human trafficking, or drug trafficking, and so on. And there's no clear response coming from the side of the position. This is a unique harm coming from this policy. And thirdly, even if there are some people who choose not to pay the ransom and instead call the police, we believe that it only serves to have more children being killed in the abduction. Because when they know that when the criminal organizations know that these families will no longer pay the ransom, we believe that the babies who are on the side of the criminal organization will be simply meaningless because they cannot get the money out of these babies, and also they are troublesome in escaping this investigation, so they will simply kill these babies. So important point here is this policy cannot completely eradicate all the cases of abduction. So there will be more victims coming from, there will be more chance of their children being killed, even if this is the sacrifice worth making. Quickly, the issue of investigation. The clear benefit coming from our stance is that once babies are rescued by paying the ransom, they have the incentive to report to the police because babies are in the hands of families. However, because the act of paying ransom itself will be criminalized, they will have no incentive to call the police. That will not lead to investigation. For this reason, they will have to vote.
Thank Opposition West. Now I call for the Opposition reply speakers and the device speech within 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reason why the film is behind into this bed is because that clear bottleneck they have to fill in was assertion in the film. First, about the principle level, they have been told us if people know there's going to be crime, they should be punished. There is no reason why government can take away people's fundamental liberty. Solution of the film was that, well, criminals see no benefit in the abductions, that they will stop the crime. Why is that? Because despite the fact we told from a negative bench, even if you abduct that, there is a case family don't tell it to the police and have a severe contact with you. There is a case for the criminal, they can sell these people to the human trafficking in these instances. The bottleneck they have to fill in into this bed was just assertion. That is the reason why the penalty team is behind into this bed. There are 2 things I want to talk about in this stage. Firstly, principle is justified today's policy. Secondly, after this policy, then the situation will get worse or better. So first about the principle. There is a big misunderstanding about intent from the alternative bench. Because who did this interpret as an intent is if you know that there's going to be a crime, you should be punished. But the point is, as I said, there is no logic behind here why people know it's crime, they have to be punished in these instances. But we told from the negative bench is that if the intent is not malicious, we should not punish that. The reason for that is because it is not a malicious intent. There is no reason government can take away people's fundamental liberty. Because the reason why government can punish people is because it fix this vicious cycle, this vicious mind, fix their own malicious intent so that they can be a functional social member. We told the reason why, initial reason why people can punish people in these instances. We had no response on their side of the house. That's why if this, as long as this intent is not malicious, we cannot
family purely want to save their own children, Mr. Speaker, who is the vital part of your life, which basically take this fundamental part of the principle into this plan. But even if we accept the premise of the case, if these people know the fact they should be punished, we told you this choice is not valid in the first place, Mr. Speaker. What we told you is choices are false choices in these instances. We told you inside of the house, if Takeru forced me, put gun on my head and kill Ushimaru, I kill him. But I only punished in these instances, right? Because of the self-defense. That means it is a clear threat to me. It is legitimate for us to conduct illegal activity. We thought this threat is so huge when this is emerging situations and the police choice is not accessible, Mr. Speaker. So the response from the Philippine is the choice to the police is accessible, right? But we told inside of the house, police is not a trustworthy actor. When there's a clear case, police don't kill it. That's why it's on principle level. We told you that fundamental this is why people can't take away people's freedom. That's why principle we are sparing. The second, after this what will happen. About the criminal. The logically heard in the Philippine is that because criminals see no benefit in the abduction, they will still stop the criminal. There is no response from our analysis. There's a clear benefit by abduction. First, we told you there is successful abduction even after taking this place because they say they cannot stop 100%, right? That means there's a case abduction can success, right? That means there's a clear benefit. Second, we told you can sell to the human trafficking. It means there's a clear benefit for them to that. That's why there's no change by criminal activity. However, the parents, we told you the parents instead will not be changed. Because even the status quo, even the parents contact with illegal criminal organization, this is a risk to your life, right? You might be abducted by the criminal organization. But you contact them. It means these emotions attached to the treatment is overrides the other times of that. That's why this, even if you are punished, that's not meaningless for the parents in these instances. So why this is bad? This is bad because in their policy, children will take over to the human trafficking after this policy. Children won't get back in the safely after this policy. But in our policy, at least these children will be saved by having the status quo. That's the clear distinction between our case and their case. For that reason, we have to take it back. Thank you.
Thank you, opposition reply speaker. Now I call upon the Prime Minister to deliver the reply speech to 4 minutes. See you.
My notes were kidnapped. Really? Yeah. The opposition keeps telling us that we're not stopping all the crime 100%. The funny thing is, we don't have that burden. We said from my speech, actually the first speech in the debate, we're minimizing harm. And in fact, what are they doing to stop all the crime? We have no idea at all. What we do know is that when you get the phone call that your child's been kidnapped, it's unfortunately, under the status quo, it's easy to make the wrong choice. That's why the government has to step in and try to make it easier to make the correct choice. Another mistake, another flaw made by the opposition is they've totally ignored the place of the idea of mitigation or rehabilitation, or they, in the debate, or actually, they only talk about that for their side, but they ignore that we also have it. So we also allow for mitigation and rehabilitation, but we also believe in deterrence, and we haven't seen any deterrence from that side of the house over there. Now I'm going to talk to you about a contradiction in their case, and then we'll get into the clashes. They keep saying over and over again that after the plan, the family of course is going to pay the money because they want to save their family, but they want to save their children. At the same time, all of their speakers keep saying, well, the families will not pay, and so there'll be radicalization. We have no idea. I think that's quite confusing right there. Now, as for our clashes, we have whether or not these people are actually guilty. Secondly, about enabling future crimes, and thirdly, about crackdowns on the criminals. So, on whether or not these people are actually guilty, we heard lots of excuses that it's a false choice or something, which you could say for anything. As Ono clearly said, if someone has does something with your girlfriend, you have passion and you kill someone and it's not your choice. And it's not your intent to break the law. Or if you're poor, you have to steal something. So it's not your fault, shogunai. So that's really crazy. And in fact, it could be a mitigating factor. If you're punished, maybe they give you some other punishment if it's crime of passion or if it's because you're poor. But it doesn't mean you don't get charged at all. We also heard this strange idea that it's self-defense. They weren't listening to, like it's the same as shooting the criminal. But it's not. If you listen to my speech in the first place, which already refuted him, we said that you're enabling the criminal. You're actually helping the criminal here. So it's totally the opposite of hurting the criminal or shooting the criminal. So obviously, in this case, you are making a choice. Because after our plan, they know what the law is. And they know that they're choosing, instead of calling the police, they're choosing to enable the crime. And that, of course, makes them criminals. Now they know. So that's the new paradigm. That leads us to the second argument, that future crimes are enabled. I told you how there will be a financial incentive for them to continue these crimes. And of course, the kidnappers can get more escape cars, more ammunition and guns, and go into other areas of crime. And they can hire more people to criminalize more people. Something they've never refuted on that side of the house. They had some kind of contradictory idea that maybe the children will be killed after the crime if there's future crimes. The problem is, they didn't recognize that there are no future crimes, which we said from the very beginning, all throughout our debate. Why would you have the incentive to risk going to jail and kidnap the children if you cannot get paid? Even their own side realizes it's wrong because they contradicted themselves on that. So, thirdly, on the crackdown, we know that at least we can have a crackdown because they're more likely to have the police. Now, they had a couple of reputations. One was, well, you get arrested if you tell the police. No, that's not what we proposed. We didn't propose you get arrested if you tell the police. So that's outside the debate. Actually, you're supposed to tell the police, but under the status quo, they're not telling the police. They're busy paying off the criminals. And then they had some weird idea that if we stop this crime, then they're just going to do a different crime. That if they don't do kidnapping, we do another crime. That's outside the debate. They're outside the debate. And the real injustice is they're allowing the criminals to keep kidnapping children. And that is the injustice. We've got to stop them from escaping. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Now, speeches are over. Thank you for your cooperation.